I just want to mention too, Crystal City is available on Amazon Prime if people are looking to find it. And it's still hitting film festivals. I think we just did Slovenia, believe it or not. And so it's expanding. So tonight, and you know, the topics usually are things that kind of are in my world, either with clients I'm seeing or friends or myself. And what I've been seeing a lot of the past couple of weeks seems to be a lot of unhealthy validation versus kind of healthy validation. And I just kind of wanted to talk about validation and how it fits in with addiction and how we can maybe start to make some improvements in that. You know, I think one of the big issues of addiction, and not just addicts, but certainly of addicts themselves, is that we start to, from an early age, learn how to seek validation from outside of ourselves. So we can't really generate the feelings that we're okay, or that we're enough, or that we're worthy from inside. And so we start to figure out how we can achieve that from the outside, whether it's through money or income or a trophy partner or a great body from the gym or whatever it is, the car we drive, all that stuff kind of starts to feed that validation, but it never quite seeps all the way through to our insides to make us really feel better about ourselves. But what it does teach us how to do is we learn how to feel good or feel accepted when we get approval. And I think this translates into even small stuff, you know, the Facebook likes. I mean, how many people are kind of addicted to posting something and then going back and seeing if people respond or if people shared it, or looking at their achievements, or kind of looking all these external factors to kind of prove to themselves they're okay. And that ends up a lifetime spent kind of chasing this validation and acceptance, and more importantly, fearing not getting it. And I think oftentimes the addicts, we start to really worry about the anxiety or have this kind of rebound effect where if we don't get just normal levels of outside validation, we start to feel as if we're really not enough and we're kind of losing ground or sinking. So I think the other thing we see sometimes in addicts is that when we have this need to be approved of, we become people pleasers. And people pleasers often can start to lose touch with what they want themselves. Their own needs get kind of lost in the clouds as they sort of pursue taking care of others. So one of the big tasks of recovery really is this learning the skill of kind of self-validation, learning how to transfer the source of our validation and acceptance and love and worthiness from things outside of ourselves to things inside ourselves. And this is really a huge switch, I think, for people. It's often the first time they've done something like that, but it's really learning how to evaluate ourselves accurately. And it doesn't always mean, you know, giving ourselves a trophy every day for waking up and getting out of bed. It means evaluating honestly what's going on. You know, I did a good job with that, or boy, I could have done better with that. It's a really honest look, not just a free pass for ourselves. But when we do this, we start to feel increasingly connected with who we are. That authenticity that is so important for recovery starts to emerge. We feel stronger, and this is the irony. We start to feel stronger that we can start to accept things about ourselves that we may not have liked before. You know, that we didn't have the kind of ego strength to accept or to understand or say, hey, that I didn't do such a great job with that, or I could really use, I could really develop more empathy for people. I don't do that very well. And we can start to evaluate ourselves instead of being kind of clobbered over the head sometimes. We're less frightened by rejection. You know, people might reject us. Not everybody has to love us. People might reject us, and guess what? We'll be okay. We don't have to be wounded. We don't have to be crippled. We don't have to try harder to make them love us. We can just be okay. And so we're also then less likely to depend on other people psychologically. So we can really step out. The bottom line here is we can step out of our comfort zone. We can start to learn how to self-validate ourselves. We can start making better choices in our lives, because if we're constantly putting other people's needs ahead of ourselves, or sort of trying to please people, the agenda there is not necessarily translatable into self-care for us. And we can slowly let go. And this is two things at the end here that are, I think, most important. We learn that we're enough. We are enough. And that's really an amazing realization to have, that is sometimes kind of, I can get it in my hands and sometimes it slips out. But for the most part, I live in that space where I'm okay and I'm enough. And then finally, and this is for the growth piece of how this translates, when we can learn how to validate ourselves internally, We can let go of old survival mechanisms because they don't aid us anymore. You know, we can let go of those behaviors, those beliefs, those actions that don't serve us and that were really sort of built to as a delivery device for external validation, as opposed to generating it from inside. So it's just a really important skill. I think we, by habit, start to seek it. We continue to seek it outside, and it's just an incredibly important skill to translate that back inside and start that adjustment. So that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, David. You know, you mentioned we can let go of our old coping mechanisms when we're able to validate ourselves internally. And just to bring that into this particular group, you know, so those old coping mechanisms are seeking external validation outside of our marriage or outside of a relationship or from strangers or, you know, through sexual addiction or alcohol or whatever. You know, addicts, you know, generally there's childhood trauma in our background that hasn't been addressed or resolved. We did not get our needs met in childhood, usually within the home. There's family dysfunction, you know, a parent is addicted or absent or inconsistent, which is what I experienced. Occasionally abusive, occasionally like overly solicitous and glommy. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Or whatever dysfunction was going on in the house, we learn that, you know, maybe we're getting hit or sexually abused or whatever. We learn that we cannot turn to the people who are supposed to take care of us and help us regulate our emotions in any sort of way where we can trust them to do that. And so we find other ways of getting our needs met. We find other ways of getting validation. You know, we go to these unhealthy, maladaptive coping mechanisms like alcohol, drugs, sex, cheating, whatever. When we finally start to feel better about ourselves, not only do we feel better about ourselves, but I think you touched on this, we're more able to become vulnerable in relationship with others, which means we're more able to reach out to a spouse or a friend or a sponsor or a therapist or a parent or whoever and ask for help when we're struggling. And that makes it much easier to stay sober, much easier to, you know, walk away from the intensity of you know, infidelity or whatever our problem behavior is.
Right. You know, if we are so afraid to reveal our weaknesses and our flaws, and in the past that probably got us hit or criticized or bullied or whatever that might have been. So we learned how to hide it pretty well. But if we're afraid to do that, that really interferes with our ability to connect with people, and it certainly would impair intimacy. So I think it's absolutely important to be able to be vulnerable and show our authentic selves. Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to use one phrase that I got in the rooms of 12-step recovery, in particular AA. People would talk about feeling comfortable in their own skin. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting concept. Do I feel comfortable in my own skin? And the answer was no. You know, like most addicts new to recovery, the last place I wanted to be was in my own skin. The last person I wanted to be was me. One of my friends in early recovery was a helicopter pilot for the DEA, for the Drug Enforcement Administration. Drug addict, mind you. But and he used to go out with his buddies to the bars, and he would give a bar bio. You know, the fake bio. Oh, I'm a doctor, or something that he thought was impressive. And I kept thinking, you're a helicopter pilot for the DEA. You fly into like Guatemala and do drug raids. I mean, what? That's the kind of bio that other people make up because it's cool.
Right.
But he was so uncomfortable in his own skin that he made up a bar bio. You know, because he just didn't want to. And I totally get that. And one of the gifts of recovery is that we do kind of slowly, you know, working the 12 steps. Here's my plug for the 12 steps today. Working the 12 steps actually helps us feel comfortable in our own skin, and in so doing prepares us and teaches us how to be healthy with other people and find validation in healthy ways. And to get support in healthy ways, so we can validate ourselves, and then we can get the support we need from other people rather than sort of relying on them for our self-esteem.
Yep.
Kind of rambling there.
Wonderful.
Okay, we have some questions. Type questions into the Q&A and we will get to them. Can you talk about reintegration after a separation? We are preparing to reintegrate after an in-home separation, moving back into the master bedroom. Any suggestions for boundary setting and other things we should consider? Good question.
Yeah, great question, and something a lot of couples face at that point in recovery. And good for you, by the way, for getting that space. Yeah, I think most of the concerns around boundaries in that situation have to do with the emotional aspect and the physical aspect, right? The emotional one being in terms of respecting needs, respecting other people's wishes in terms of space. Sometimes it's really useful to have good communication processes where you can really do at least like a 10-minute or so check-in every day. I think that really helps clear the air for issues that may arise. So just this really healthy communication style. And then just that ability to really have real respect for each other. I think if we can kind of turn up the dial on really honoring both parties, I think sometimes, especially long-term couples, can start to take each other for granted or go right into kind of that bickery mode and all that stuff that's kind of unhealthy. But I really think a space that's kind of honesty, and I think of it as kind of a sacred space, honestly. It's a place that you want to keep as pure as you can in terms of the energy in the room and the emotions, and really kind of keep it healthy in that sense. The other boundary, I guess, would be sexual and physical. I think oftentimes early on, I think it's always important to really give kind of preference to the partner in that regard, in terms of how he or she feels about sexual contact, certainly, or even hugging or being close. I assume at this point, if you're considering reintegrating, you've had some of that negotiation and feel comfortable with that. But I think that's really important. Just kind of checking in with each other, asking about making advances in terms of physical contact, and just really keeping that as respectful as possible. It's a change, and I think what that can happen when people come back together, it can trigger a little bit of anxiety and fear because those old seeking safety mechanisms on the part of the partner can get kind of activated. So I think it's really important to be able to say, not necessarily go back out of the bedroom, although that might be a choice, but really, kind of a not tonight, I need space, and just really be able to have a no questions asked policy about setting boundaries. Okay, I'm not really in the mood for anything. So kind of respecting that and not really pushing it, making assumptions, that kind of thing. I think just really being careful with each other is the bottom line, and checking with feelings. I really like that couples dialogue we see in Imago therapy, which is really helpful, I think, where there's a kind of a lot of redundancy in the communication, but where someone says, I say XYZ, and the partner will say, I hear you say XYZ, did I get that right? And then kind of showing some empathy, and I can understand how you would feel that way, and it makes sense to me, that kind of thing. Just really being as careful and as clear with each other as you can. I think when I've seen couples get in trouble with where there's assumptions, where people aren't spelling things out directly, where they're not expressing their needs directly, where they kind of hold on to it or bite their tongue, and then it comes out later with anger or resentment or something. So just be in the present and be as clear with each other as you possibly can. It's probably the best advice I can give.
Yeah, and I also think couples can, as they reintegrate, set boundaries around technology, like don't look at your cell phone in the bedroom. It's no texting, no, you don't need to check the sports scores on your cell phone in the bedroom, no laptop in the bedroom, no TV after 10 p.m. or no TV at all. I don't have a TV in my bedroom. I don't want one. It's not what I use my bedroom for. But a lot of couples do like to watch the news and then go to sleep or something, which I don't recommend because that'll keep you up all night. Yeah,
especially these days. Let me just mention that there is such a thing called sleep hygiene. If you Google that, you'll get all kinds of information. But the concept is basically that we want to keep our bedrooms kind of for sleep and for sex. And not, you know, I think so many Americans live in their bedrooms, watching TV, having dinner in the bed, just reading, doing everything. And what that does is really kind of train us to not associate our bedroom with sleep. So a lot of times when people have sleep issues, they'll have watched TV or they'll watch the news, as Scott said, and get kind of activated. And it's really important, I think, to just have a cool, dark, quiet place that's not used for everything. And again, in these days of COVID, where I think people are kind of stressed for time and place, it might be difficult, but I think it's really, if you can keep your bedroom for sleep and sex, that'd be really a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, David mentioned doing a check-in, which I think is great because it builds intimacy. But I think couples should agree, no, we don't fight in the bedroom. If we're going to have an argument, we're not going to do it here, because this is a sacred space where we build intimacy. If we need to, arguing can build intimacy if you do it right, but it can also make it really difficult. I am a recovering Chem Sex addict, been clean from meth for 245 days. Congratulations.
Yeah,
I'm not doing as well with watching porn and thinking of Chem Sex, which I know is not good for my recovery. Any suggestions to help? There's a lot for you to address there, David.
Yeah, so first of all, 245 days clean from meth is a big deal. And so good for you. I think that's terrific. Now, on the porn and thinking of Chem Sex, you know, one of the things I've seen where meth users kind of can really stall their recovery, because really meth, more than almost anything else, hijacks the brain and the arousal template so extremely that it requires some time to kind of readjust back down to kind of human levels of stimulation and dopamine. And in that time, a lot of times people's sexual desire goes away, people have trouble with sexual functioning, and so they may turn to porn to kind of get aroused. And the problem with that is that oftentimes the porn that people watch is kind of meth porn, if you will, drug using porn, or even if it's not, our brains may go there. Those meth chem sex fantasies are so deeply grooved in our brains that we kind of go there automatically. You know, it's like, this week I've used the example several times of, you know, the animals that my dog knows how to get to the door of my apartment, you know, the horse that knows how to get back to the barn. Our brains know how to go to that spot. We don't have to think about it, it's automatic. And that's the danger, because we have to let that automated process kind of fizzle away and dry up and disappear while we replace it with other things. And so a lot of guys, even though they're not using meth, they're not ingesting drugs, they're looking at porn that reminds them of using drugs. And we know from brain scans that we know how your brain looks if you ingest meth, and we know how your brain looks if you start thinking about meth. And guess what? They're pretty much the same. Our brain lights up almost as if we've used the drug, and that sets up this whole tale of preoccupation. So in terms of when you say not good for your recovery, that's why it's not good for recovery, because it can really start to plant these seeds of using, and your brain, whether it's even conscious or not, your brain is aware of that and starting to give you little signals of gee, that might not be so bad. That sounds pretty good. And that kind of preoccupation. And that can happen even at a subconscious level. It can really start to undermine your recovery. So
this goes for all addictions, not just chem sex. I mean, if we're still trampling that fantasy pathway that leads us to addiction, it's an easy path to travel. I mean, we have to, you're about to say, we're about to have to let that path get overgrown and build a new path, I think. So I'm going to let you do that. But I just wanted to make the point, every addiction, if you're not a chem sex addict, apply this to your own addiction.
Right. I mean, porn is another classic example of sex. And this goes, you know, if we're thinking about our middle circle, right? If I have a guy who uses drugs and acts out sexually and who's an addict, that would be in his inner circle. But it may be that going on the apps, you know, Grindr or Scruff or Tinder, might easily be, if not in the inner circle, in the middle circle, the kind of slippery slope area, because we know when we pull out those apps and start to look at them, our brain starts to think about the drug and the sex and acting out. And so all these little cues, and remember, dopamine is the star of the show with these addictions, and dopamine is what kind of glues things together. So if we, any parts of our ritual ringtones, phones, neighborhoods, ending work, starting work, Friday nights, paying bills, an argument with somebody, all that stuff can kind of lead to a cue, not even conscious, to use the drug. And as soon as we start thinking about that, it lights up and it's like ready. It's on instant on. And so very dangerous. So as Scott said, what we have to do with those pathways is to kind of, because we know, and the unfortunate things about the arousal template is once a little fantasy scenario is in the arousal template, it stays there pretty much. You can't really get it out very easily. And so we have to learn how to kind of let it get overgrown, whatever metaphor you want, dusty, just kind of forget about it and try to find other things that are going to give us stimulation, not that. The thing though, the danger here is that because it'll always be there, and hopefully it does get grown over, you forget about it, it's long gone. But if God forbid you should relapse or start thinking about relapse and go back, you can find that spot and reawaken it. It'll come back to life. And so we have to be really cautious about those scenarios. I think more relapse is caused by that particular phenomenon of kind of not intending to use the drug, but kind of thinking about the fantasy aspects of it, or euphoric recall, where we remember the good things and kind of selectively omit the horrible aftermath. So yeah, be very careful. Our brains are very powerful, and just thinking about stuff can really set off a chain reaction that you don't want to start.
Okay, next one here. My wife and I are trying to do a therapeutic separation due to my sex addiction. We've been apart for almost 7 weeks now. It has been very difficult as I have a lot of anger issues on top of everything else. My wife and I are battling both individually and together. I have a lot of anger and enmeshment issues with my family, especially with my mom. I'm dealing with a lot of family issues. I lost my older brother very unexpectedly in July. We were very, very close, but we haven't talked much in the past year. As I was learning how to put up healthy boundaries. My father's dealing with the rare type of cancer that has come back again. My wife's battling breast cancer. My mother is in a not so good place because of the loss of her son. My question is, excuse me, I have been debating whether or not to enter an intensive rehab facility to deal with all these issues head on, so I can try to regain my marriage along with my own identity. Or I'm thinking about seeing a CSAT counselor weekly. What would you recommend? Is there one you would recommend more than the other? Any advice you can give me? Thank you. Rehab versus outpatient versus other options.
Right. And Jim, sorry about the really difficult circumstances you're going through. I mean, that's a huge amount of stress and trauma, frankly, that's going on simultaneously. Just a whole lot of grief and loss and potential loss and illness. So I think just the list of things you named there would, I think, overwhelm a lot of people's ability to deal with it effectively if they're trying to get back and get the recovery in shape. So when we look at kind of stress levels and different kinds of factors that would kind of indicate what level of care someone might go to, I think outpatient CSAT once a week is somebody who's in really good shape. Basically, that's almost a maintenance kind of thing to explore issues, but with kind of a lot of stability there. I think just given all the issues going on, I think probably some kind of much more higher structured level of care would be beneficial for you, honestly. And I think just to deal with some of this stuff, the anger worries me in terms of potential relapse, just all of the stressors. So I think some kind of, at the very least, a partial hospitalization program, but I think you'd really benefit from a residential program where you could get away from some of these stressors if you can, and just take time away for yourself. The benefit of any kind of residential program is that it provides a kind of a safe container that by definition kind of separates you a little bit from the outside world and helps you kind of focus on issues that you need to address. It gives you skills to manage some of these things, because that's the other thing. To deal with a lot of these stressors is going to require a lot of skills and emotional control and what we call affective regulation, managing feelings, not letting feelings overwhelm you, good communication, a lot of that. So I think a residential program would be very beneficial. And if there one more than another, both Scott and I have put our hearts and our souls into seeking integrity. So I really
we're partial.
I do believe it's the best program in the country, frankly. And you can shop around, you can look around, but if you do consider a residential program, don't forget to check us out. I think.
And I just want to add, seeing a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist, weekly, that's less than the bare minimum that somebody in early recovery should be doing. I mean, that's literally less than the bare minimum. It's a CSAT counselor weekly, plus group therapy weekly, plus 12-step meetings 3, 4, 5 times a week. I mean, you need to be doing something every day, especially in early recovery, and probably for the first year or so. A CSAT counselor weekly is probably not enough. And personal experience there, a CSAT counselor once a week, not enough. That's being nutty. But you're going to need definitely more than that. And with everything that's going on, I kind of agree with David. Rehab might be a good idea. And it might help you sort of decompress and get some clarity on your life.
Right.
I think that's the big thing, is just get some real clarity on what's going well in your life, what's not going well, what you can control, what you can't control. And that's probably not going to come to you until you get away from your life for a little while.
Yeah, it takes kind of stepping out of it, because you're dealing with enmeshment, you're dealing with sudden loss, grief, anger, recovery issues, reintegration, chronic illness in the family. I mean, there's a huge amount of stuff. It's something where you really kind of take care of yourself as best you can. I think if it were me, if that were my situation, I certainly would be seeking a place where I could get the support. Because even if, and I've seen this in people that have done a lot of therapy, had a lot of growth, when they are confronted with this list of stressors, it really challenges everybody's ability to manage and cope. I mean, it's an overwhelming list of stuff. And so I think the more assistance you can have to get tools to deal with it, and also to stage, okay, what's the first thing I need to think about? What's the second thing? Just kind of get some help, kind of making a plan to deal with it. Good luck to you.
Yeah. I mean, good luck. There's so much going on. And I'm glad you're here, reaching out for support and advice. Good evening to you both. I believe that achieving self-validation will help me in the long run. We believe that too. My first response to my partner's pain, so this is coming from the addict, is how horrible I feel as a person, which I realize is selfish. Is that related in any way to not being able to validate myself, or is it something else? Second, I had a question in regard to safe harbor. Generally, what are some ways that couples go about this? Do they live together, not live together some of the time, etc.? So kind of two separate questions there, but I'll let you take them as you see fit, David.
Yeah, so that the validation piece, I think we can feel horrible when we get kind of discovered, and when the impact of what our actions as addicts have done to the people we care about. And that's an important step, by the way, because I think if you're in active addiction, sometimes, almost most times, that gets disconnected. We kind of live in this little bubble that protects us, if you will, from the pain of what we've caused other people. So when it comes crashing in, oftentimes the first response is like, I feel terrible, and a lot of shame spirals can occur. So people kind of get down in the dumps. And I think that's not necessarily a useful place to be, I think. I think it's important to take responsibility for what's happened in the proper time, through step work, to acknowledge it and make amends as necessary. But I think it's to kind of, and you say it, it's kind of selfish, kind of it's still kind of all about me, right? If we drop into that, oh my God, I'm such a terrible person, we're still kind of we're doing our own thing, and our partner may still be suffering there across the room. So I think one of the things we do at Seeking Integrity is help people understand that we are good people who did bad things. So I think it's that important to separate the responsibility. And by the way, that's not giving up responsibility for the action. An addict has to take that responsibility. But we also want to try to make a little distinction between the things that the addict did in his addiction versus their core as a human being. And
David, can you talk a little about guilt versus shame in that sort of self-loathing picture?
Yeah. So guilt, is obviously feeling bad about something we've done. That's basically an action we've taken that has hurt someone or hurt ourselves, and it's something we've done. Sometimes if someone has no empathy or is really a narcissist or even antisocial, they will have more guilt about getting caught as opposed to actually feeling pain for what they've done. Shame, on the other hand, is not guilt over an action. It's this belief that somehow we are flawed, that our internal core is defective. And I've had clients use that word. I'm defective. I'm damaged goods. I'm just this kind of waste of human matter, and it's that's really a destructive place to be, because that's not any kind of launch pad for recovery. That's just that can result in that shame circle. People just kind of descend into that mess of feeling terrible. So we do want to acknowledge what we do as addicts. We want to take responsibility for that. We make a commitment, sincere commitment to change, to do things better. But it's also important to know that we have some redeeming qualities there that we can hang on to and build on. That's the foundation for our recovery, the good stuff. And honestly, we may not see it. That's the beauty of groups, is that sometimes we need a group to reflect back to us that reality, because it's very easy for us as individuals, because we are a little selfish as addicts, to kind of get into that. It's like, oh my God, I'm the worst person of everybody. That little addict, can you top this thing? But that's just really a mind game and just not very useful. So I think to be aware of shame, be aware of if you're getting into it, and try to get out of it as fast as you can. But to really feel the pain, what I would suggest is talking to your partner about the pain, feel what's going on and discuss it and see what you can do to help it or make it better. The second part of the question, every couple, I don't know that I can generalize on this. Every couple seems to have different scenarios. In many cases, I've seen couples separate temporarily, physically, because they are just easier to deal with all the emotions of that reintegration piece. Others can do it in the same house. Others can live together with just setting boundaries and sleep in the same bed. It's really highly individualized. So Scott, do you have anything more to say about that? Any trends or general advice on that safe harbor thing, or the other?
Yeah, sorry, I keep muting myself because somebody's being noisy. Yeah, just to address guilt versus shame. Again, guilt is a natural and healthy thing to feel. I did something bad. I don't want to do that again. I hurt somebody. I need to change my behavior. Guilt motivates us for change. We love guilt. It's no fun to feel, but from a motivation and recovery and healing standpoint, it's really good. Shame is like quicksand. If I just think I'm a bad person and there's nothing I can do about that, I am not motivated to change. I am motivated to stay stuck. So the fact that you're feeling your partner's pain and feeling bad about it, if it's guilt, that's actually good, because it's going to motivate you to change. If it's shame, not so good, and you may want to work through that because it's going to keep you stuck. As far as safe harbor, I think Dr. Rob writes in Out of the Doghouse, he likes a safe harbor for the first year, which means we're not going to make any big relationship decisions about staying or going or whatever. For the first year, we're going to see how this goes. Then he says, a lot of couples go, a year? Are you crazy? So he gets them to agree to like 90 days, and then they extend it for 90 days. And it ends up being a year, but they take it in chunks. And, there can be therapeutic separations or not. you will have to agree on boundaries that work for you as a couple and as individuals. I encourage you to do that with guidance from a couples counselor. But yeah, it looks different for everybody. You'll find what works for you. And, if there are kids, you have to interact because, even if you're separated, you still have to interact because you've got kids. If you're living in the same house, even if you're in separate rooms, you still have to pay bills and you both have to be fed and, things like that. So it's a give and take, I think, to find the boundaries that work for you. So, next one here. I am married. I'm a 40-year sex addict. I don't know if this is a 40-year-old sex addict or somebody who's been a sex addict for 40 years. And have recently been abstinent from sex with my wife of 31 years. Well, I think we've been a sex addict for 40 years. Otherwise, we got married at 9. Okay, so been a sex addict for 40 years, abstinent from sex with my wife. 31 years for about 120 days. We are now looking to begin again when she is ready, so that's exciting. We sometimes used to watch porn as a mood setter or background entertainment when we had sex. And while I have no masturbation or porn in my inner circle, does that usually count when I am with my wife? How do we define what a healthy sexual relationship is for us at this point? I just want to say, if porn is in your inner circle, that means porn is in your inner circle, whether your wife is present or not. No porn for you. Okay, I'm done. David.
You sound like the porn Nazi there, like the soup Nazi, right? No porn for you. Yeah, I think, it's a very common thing for couples and individuals, I guess, but I'm talking about the couple dynamic here. For couples to use porn to kind of set the tone or add a dimension of some sort. And I think it's really not a great idea, because what happens oftentimes is that both parties, it's like having a third person in the room, right? Both parties start to relate to the porn on the TV as opposed to each other. And we've talked here before about watching porn, whether you're an addict or not, is going to pull you off into a fantasy. And that's a problem. You ask what healthy sex is. I think my definition of healthy sex would be really what I would call connected sex, connected with your partner in terms of feelings, physical sensations, emotions, pleasuring, receiving pleasure, the give and take. Sometimes there's laughter, sometimes it's awkward, it's just very real, but you're in the present tense, you're connected. I think anytime porn is present, it just kind of pulls you out. And the distinction we make is that when we're in that connected zone, that's what we consider healthy sex. It's same with masturbation, by the way. If you're connected sensation and you're pleasuring yourself and aware of what's going on and just really in the present, in your body, feeling it, fine. If you're masturbating because you've had a tough day, or you're trying to go to sleep, or you have 15 minutes to kill, or need to just kind of escape to blow off steam, or for whatever reason to kind of disconnect or dissociate, to get off into fantasy, that's kind of the addictive nature of that. And I really caution people about that. And I think just porn, because any kind of screen is hypnotic, we fall into kind of a trance. And even if you're not an addict, and I agree with Scott, there's no like conditional clauses in your circle plan for situational exceptions. So yeah, even if you're not, even if we're not in your circle, I think it's a bad idea for couples. I would much rather have a couple relate to each other, make eye contact with each other, hold each other, connect with each other physically, connect with each other emotionally.
I'm just thinking about it as a mood setter, and I'm thinking, do you and your wife want to have sex in a strip club? I mean, because to me, it's just like, that's a mood setter, I guess. Other people being sexual, well, it doesn't feel very intimate to me.
Yeah.
Which is what you're wanting to rebuild. Can you talk a little bit about Masters and Johnsons and some of the exercises people can use?
Yeah. So there's a really great exercise that would be great for you guys, great for any couple. It's called Sensei Focus. And Scott, can you put it in the chat?
Yeah,
people
I will.
wonder about the spelling of it. So everybody knows Masters and Johnson were a couple that were sex therapists. quite a while ago now, but they came up with this a couples intimacy exercise called Sensei Focus. And the name is kind of strange. What it simply means is focusing on the senses. And it's a intimacy communication exercise that you do over and over again, you repeat. And in the first times you do it, it's specifically non-sexual. So the idea of Sensei Focus is that one partner is the pleasurer, one partner is the receiver, and the receiver guides the pleasurer's hand to different places and can control the touch. So the idea is it's not sexual, so it's stroking, it's kissing, it's pinching, it's rubbing, it's massaging, just making contact. And so the idea is that you can be a pleasure to your partner, and the partner can guide you and say, okay, this area is nice, that's too hard, this is too soft, I'd like more here. And it's a great way to just kind of reconnect. Because one of the casualties of sex addiction particularly is that this kind of lack of trust, and there's a breach of the connection, the emotional and kind of energetic connection between the two people. I think this helps start to reestablish that. And very often, by the way, sometimes they do this for erectile dysfunction, and very often, very quickly, because the emphasis is not on having an orgasm, the emphasis is specifically not on having an erection even, and that takes the pressure off, and sometimes that problem will quickly get solved. And it may happen that sex happens initially, but usually the therapist instructs the person not to. But then gradually the sexual activity is introduced into the exercise. So anyway, it's a great exercise to kind of help reestablish connection, because it can be awkward, I think, for a couple, even of 40 years to, or 31 years to sort of kind of reestablish that intimacy after addiction.
And I also think it's great training for a sex addict. I mean, this gentleman says he's been a sex addict for 40 years. Part of being a sex addict is we disconnect sex from emotional intimacy. We compartmentalize sex. It becomes a thing unto itself. We have our relationship with our wife or partner, and then we have sex. And, they don't mix, they don't meet. And this is a way for you as a sex addict to slow it down and to emotionally connect with your wife while you're also physically connecting, because there's a lot of talking with the Sensei Focus. There's a lot of feedback. And there are other exercises you can share about, fantasies or what you've always enjoyed about sex with your wife, and she can tell you what she's always and what she didn't enjoy. And, it's a way of getting to know each other in a physical way that's not sexual, and then in a somewhat sexual way that's not entirely sexual, and then in a sexual way that's sexual but is intimately connected. And as a sex addict, I mean, it's very hard to go from completely non-intimate sex. And I've had so many guys tell me, I was acting out with my wife. I was using my wife as my object so that I could act out. Their wife wasn't present. Their wife was just another body. And they love their wives and find their wives beautiful and attractive and all those things. But when sex entered the equation, she became an object, just like a stripper or a prostitute or porn or anything else. And this is a way to break through that barrier.
And there's two things just to say about that. I think one of the common things we see with sex addiction or chem sex addiction or porn addiction, all these things that we treat is this kind of gradual with the addictive process, this separation of what I call lust and love, where people start to have sexual desire, physical lust, only where there's no emotional connection. And the two get really, and for people with whom they have an emotional connection or who they love, it's really hard to find a sexual attraction. And so part of the healing is kind of bringing those two things back together. And that's a challenge sometimes. The other thing I just want to mention is that sex addiction, chem sex, porn, all these things are such fantasy-driven head trips that something like Sensei Focus is kind of a workaround. It bypasses your head and goes right to your body. What are the feeling? What are you feeling? What are the sensation? How's that touch feel? And it kind of is a different way of experiencing each other that keeps you. We talked early on today about how deeply grooved those memories are. It's an automatic process. When we start getting to a sexual setting, our minds can kind of take over and, oh, I know how to do this. And they take us right into our addictive spots. And this is kind of like training wheels to kind of get back, and it's relearning how to communicate with each other without going right to that default fantasy.
And this can take us back to our Chem Sex question earlier, where you're trying to get away from that well-worn Chem Sex pathway. If you're lucky enough to have a partner to practice this with, it's a great way to build a new pathway while ignoring the old pathway.
Right. The unfortunate thing, with a lot of Chem Sex addicts, it's methamphetamine particularly so extreme. A lot of times the partners are long gone. But if you're lucky enough to have somebody in your life that you can do this with, it's a really healing process. There are some people that are trying to actually modify it for individual sessions, which is an interesting idea. It's very useful somehow, but I think it will work as well.
Yeah. Hi, I will be attending Seeking Integrity starting December 27th. Looking forward to seeing you. I'm struggling with how to respond to my wife, who is in trauma in part from a recent staggered disclosure. Yuck. And she continually brings up the same issues and asks the same questions, which is common, especially with staggered disclosure. What advice do you have on how I can approach the conversation and be there for her without emotionally reacting to it and asking her this again? Thoughts, David?
Yeah, so this is another very common scenario we see, right? With the kind of maybe getting discovered or caught, or a little piece leaks out and you kind of own that, but there's a whole bunch more that you don't own, and that may leak out too. And so that kind of dripping, drip by drip staggered disclosure is so incredibly painful for a partner, because they just kind of get their bearings. They, okay, well, I can deal with that, or I won't deal with that, or this is the story, and then something else comes along. So the rug is continually pulled out from under them. So there is a kind of a traumatic reaction going on. So first of all, I hope that, and I'm glad to know that you're going to be coming to us, but I hope your wife has some support as well. There are people that specialize in this partner trauma, and I think it'd be very important for her to have resources in this area so she can start to process her feelings. And what partners are doing in this, and it can lead to reactions as you're describing here, but they're constantly kind of seeking safety. They're seeking emotional safety, and the way that translates is sometimes becoming great detectives, sort of checking out things, tracing things, or detective work for treatment places. I think probably more of our clients come through us via their wives' research about seeking integrity than themselves, but they also become really experts at finding out where you are and putting together receipts, and all of this which seems like just kind of this obsessive thing, and it really is kind of obsessive thing, but the desire there is to like get reassurance, and the belief is that if I just get more information, I can get my hands around this, I can start to deal with this horrible situation. The problem is that that's an anxiety state, and there's never enough information to really make you feel better. There's always going to be that shadow of doubt. And so it's a strategy that doesn't work very well for a lot of people. So I think one thing I would encourage your partner to do is to kind of focus on herself and kind of start to let go of some of the detective work until you have a proper disclosure somewhere down the line. And then, when it keeps coming up, I think you just have to really have some empathy for where she's coming from. And I know it probably feels like, oh, this again, but yeah, this again. And she's trying to deal with this trauma. Basically, if you had to sum up what trauma is, it's this strong, painful emotional reaction that overwhelms our brain's ability to digest it. And so it's there, it's alive. And so people keep spinning around in that same stuff because it can't get kind of filed away. And so that's trauma. And so, I think it's going to come up until she starts to get some support. It may also help, by the way, that once you do come to treatment and you guys make a plan, that we often really encourage, okay, let's just put all that on the shelf until disclosure, where it can come out in a more formal and organized way. So, I think just have patience, make sure you both are getting support, and just, this was largely the responsibility of the addict, right? You created the situation. And so I think just have a little bit of just a few more weeks to get by, be kind and roll with it. and then hopefully the need for that kind of constant rehashing will fade with some time and some good therapy.
Yeah, and staggered disclosure is just the worst for a betrayed partner. We call it death by paper cut. Paper cuts really hurt. And then if they find out something big on a staggered disclosure, it's like getting hit with a sledgehammer. And then they might find out something little tomorrow, and it feels like they're getting hit with the same sledgehammer. It's really brutal on them, which is why we and pretty much everybody who treats sex addiction recommends a formal therapeutic disclosure where everything comes out all at once. All the questions are answered. There's a lot of back and forth. It's a process over several therapy sessions. Your therapist is involved. Her therapist is involved. You both have support. When I'm working with sponsees or guys that I'm just talking to at the treatment center, wherever, the language to use, I think, and David can correct me if I'm wrong, is I will tell you everything. I promise that I will tell you everything, but can we please do it in a formal therapeutic disclosure where you and I both have support and you can ask questions and I'll take a polygraph and you'll know that I told you everything. Because doling it out piecemeal, I can see is causing you immense amounts of pain. I understand you want and need to know so that you can feel safe. And I want to tell you, but let's do it the right way. That way you're taking it on. You're not pushing the blame on her. You're not saying, oh my God, you keep bringing this up. Oh my, just say, I want to tell you everything. I promise I will tell you everything. We will schedule it with our therapist. Let's do it the right way so that I don't do any further damage to our relationship.
And I would add to that, and those are great. I love the language there, Scott. And just in terms of language also, I would add two kind of concepts. One is to when you're in this dialogue, to validate what she's feeling. Something like, I can see how you would feel that way. And then to empathize with it. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry that you're experiencing this pain. But I think just to really relate as best you can would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, acknowledging her pain and acknowledging that you caused it, and acknowledging that, yes, I want to make it right, and I know that means telling you everything. I promise I will do that. Let's do it on the schedule that our therapist set up,
right?
So that we can stop this death by paper cut.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one more here. Follow-up question in regard to safe harbor. What are some guidelines about sex during safe harbor? Absolutely none. Does the betrayed partner lead it? Thoughts? Interesting question.
I guess there's so many factors that depend on the couple and what's going on there. But I think generally you want to assume, I would say, start with the assumption of none and then figure out how to reintegrate safely. And I would definitely give the lead to the betrayed partner. That's just kind of common wisdom, I think, in that sense. And let her or him kind of guide and set the pace, if you will. I think good communication and really expressing needs and all that is just more of a guide than any kind of rule of thumb in terms of a day count or something like that. Just really that ability to really be in sync with each other and communicate and again, respecting boundaries. And hopefully both people can express their needs and their boundaries in that sense, and as it progresses.
Yeah, and I always think it's important to remember that sex is not relationship glue. Makeup sex is great, but it's not going to fix anything. So keep that in mind.
Nor is having a baby.
Yeah. Let's squeeze in one more. As a person who has long sobriety, how do you stay connected to your higher power on a consistent basis throughout the day?
Wow, great question. So I think I'm in long-term sobriety. I think what I do is really try to stay present and really try to stay grateful and be aware of what I can be grateful for in my life, which is a lot, and to really stay connected to that. And for me also, it's a sense of purpose. I think it's why do I get up out of bed in the morning? Why did I survive different things that a lot of people didn't? And what's it all about and what I'm going to do with that? And I think to make good use of that. And that, for me, that kind of keeps me in touch with my higher power in terms of just that daily gratitude. And also, by the way, a daily ritual. Take 10 minutes each day to at least to meditate and to pray, which for me is listening, just in silence. And yeah, I think those daily rituals are really extremely important. Scott, how about you in that question?
I'm a big fan of the daily ritual. I do mine first thing in the morning before I shower. The only thing I might do before my conscious contact with my higher power, which is 10 minutes, is maybe I'll go to the bathroom, depending on, if my bladder's about to burst or not. But it is the first thing I do. It involves a gratitude list. I have my ritual that works for me. It has adapted over the years. My higher power has morphed over the years. That's fine. I don't think my higher power cares if he morphs. As long as I'm trying to stay connected. How do I stay connected on a consistent basis through the day? I really don't. But I will pause and recognize, you know what? I'm off track right now. And then I'll back away and I'll do some breathing. I'll say, where are my feet? That's my question for me. Where are my feet? It grounds me in the present. It's a mindfulness act. And sometimes I'll do another gratitude list, and and that gets me back on track. And but I've had to practice this over the years. I don't have nearly as much sobriety as David, but I have quite a lot. And I still practice on a daily basis. The practice of spirituality is exactly that. It is a practice. We learn, it evolves, we evolve, our higher power evolves, and that's cool. At least in my world, some people, they come in with a set higher power and they stick with it forever. Also cool, whatever works, but practice it every day. That's the key.
For sure.
And continue asking questions like this to your support network, because people will have ideas and you can try them out and figure out what works for you and what doesn't. So cool. We are out of time. And thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for wonderful questions today. Really excellent questions today. We love that. We will be back next week, which will be the 23rd. And we hope to see you then. So any thoughts, David, before we go?
No, just everybody stay safe. Keep coming back, as they say in program. Yeah. Take care.
Bye all. Thanks for being here.